Hello, everyone, and welcome to this cyber seminar series. I am going to wait a couple more minutes and let everybody start logging on, and then we'll get started. All right. Hello again, and welcome to this cyber seminar series, Hydrologic Science and Indigenous Voices. Kawasi is excited to host this series alongside Riverbytes LLC founder, Dr. Maribeth Kniffin. And before I hand things off to our speakers for today, I wanted to give a brief overview of Kawasi while folks are still getting logged on and getting settled. So my name is Lisa Muchachito, and I am the Community Outreach Specialist for Kawasi. And Kawasi is the consortium of universities for the advancement of hydrologic science, Inc. And we are a nonprofit organization funded in part by the National Science Foundation. And our mission is to advance water science by strengthening interdisciplinary collaboration, providing critical infrastructure through our data services, and promoting education in water science at all levels. We seek to fulfill this mission in two main ways: through our data services and our community services. Kawasi Data and Compute Services provide tools and support the entire data lifecycle, from data discovery to collaboration to publication. Kawasi hosts two data repositories for water science data, HydroShare and HIS, which is also known as data.kawasi.org. And the hope is that by providing this support and infrastructure, Kawasi can help researchers formulate and execute their data management plans, be effective data stewards, and meet the requirements of funding agencies. And the other side of our organization is our community services. And these include things such as grants, workshops, a summer institute with the National Water Center, and that's for graduate students. We have webinar series and events such as the one we're doing today. We have a virtual university and a guest lecturer database. And there are a few upcoming events that I would like to highlight. So firstly, we have a new workshop coming this summer, and applications are now open for the Surface Water Field School, which will be held in person in Eugene, Oregon. And the application window for this closes tomorrow, May 19th at 11:59 Eastern Time. So if you're interested, you better get on that one. And Kawasi also seeks to be a resource for the water science community as a whole. There are a number of community meetings coming up soon, including next month, we've got the ModFlow and More Conference, and that's going to be held at Princeton University. And I'll actually be hosting a desk in the exhibit hall there. So if you're at Princeton, stop on by. And then we've also got the Frontiers in Hydrology meeting, and that is co-sponsored with Kawasi and EGU, and that'll be taking place in San Juan, Puerto Rico. And here is just a brief summary of upcoming deadlines from Kawasi that I mentioned. So we've got a lot going on, and there's always more coming. So we've got more workshops, more webinar series this summer and this fall that will be announced shortly. So I would encourage you to visit our new, recently updated website, and you can sign up for our newsletter. You can join our community Slack channel to learn more about what we're doing and keep up to date. And then I'm going to add links to many of these things in a moment so that you can easily access them. And those will be in the chat. Also contact information in case you have any questions. But before we get started, just a few logistical things. This webinar is being recorded and will be posted on the Kawasi YouTube channel later. Secondly, we ask that you use the Q&A functionality to submit your questions to our speakers. And finally, we expect that all involved with Kawasi cyber seminars uphold the Kawasi Code of Conduct and promote and maintain a professional, considerate, respectful, and collaborative virtual environment. And thank you again for joining this webinar. And thank you to Dr. Maribeth Kniffin and grandmother Margaret Bahan for this presentation and providing this opportunity for engagement. So we're really happy to have you here today. And with that, I will let Maribeth take it away. Thank you.
Hello, thank you. I'm going to share my screen quickly. Okay. So welcome everyone, and thank you very much for your interest in hydrologic science and Indigenous voices, the Cyber Seminar Series. I'm your host, Maribeth Kniffin, a hydrogeologist and the Vice Chair of the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Standing Committee for Kawasi. Some of the things that we've been working on the DEI Committee for Kawasi are developing a charter and a code of conduct, and we will be hosting an informal conversation at the Frontiers of Hydrology conference this June. So please look out for that and attend if you're interested in learning more about what we've been doing and where we're going to go in the future. I'm also the founder of Riverbytes LLC, a small business dedicated to placing groundwater concepts into the global vernacular through education, community-based collaborative modeling, processes and analyses, and citizen science. The purpose of this series is to highlight Indigenous voices and ways of knowing, expanding the definition of hydrologic science to be more inclusive. The 6-week Cyber Seminar Series features 5 individuals working in or alongside hydrologic sciences and who identify as Indigenous. The series takes us on a journey through a variety of geographic spaces and the hearts and minds occupying those spaces. We start in the center of North American continent with in Oklahoma with grandmother Margaret Bahan, and travel then to Colorado, Wisconsin, Arizona, and we end in Louisiana. Throughout the series, speakers will explore how hydrological sciences are defined and who is included in those definitions. Throughout the series, we will discuss how Native American people relate to water, what water issues are important for us to reflect on, how we can increase inclusivity in the hydrologic sciences community, and what challenges and opportunities we face as scientists and community members when finding resilient solutions to climate change. Again, I'm very grateful for your presence here today and your interest in this topic. I welcome you to think throughout the series about what could be tangible outcomes of this event, and how can we make hydrological sciences more welcome to diverse ways of knowing, being, and understanding. There's been a movement to do land acknowledgements at the beginning of sessions, and I recently moved to Baton Rouge, Louisiana, the mouth of the Mississippi River Basin, which connects 31 states and receives water from over 2/3 of the United States. And many different Native American people have lived in this region over time, including the Alabama, the Kawasi, the Choctaw, the Chitimacha, the Homa, the Tenuca, Biloxi, and more. And I'm going to share a link right now in the chat. This is just one resource that you can use to identify what tribes have lived or currently live in the region where you inhabit. And that one of the things that we're hoping to do throughout the series is really to put together different resources so that these resources can be centralized. And if you're interested in follow-up action and receiving information about these resources and being part of creating this inclusive community, I invite you to go to my link on the website, Riverbytes website, And please either subscribe or sign up. There's a section where you can write an email to me and just let me know what your interest is. It's right on the website page under questions, comments, or collaboration. So with that, I heartfully welcome Grandmother Margaret Wahan. So I heartfully welcome great grandmother Margaret Wahan, Spider Woman, who is a Native American woman, and she is Cheyenne Arapahoe and 4th generation descendant of a survivor of the Sand Creek Massacre. Margaret is of the Kit Fox clan of the Cheyenne Nation on her mother's side and the Rabbit Lodge on her father's side. Margaret is an award-winning artist and sculptress of traditional clay storyteller dolls and beadwork shared with her by her Comanche Pueblo mother-in-law. In addition, she is a licensed substance abuse counselor and has led retreats for children and codependents of alcoholics to help First Nation people. Through recognition of her vast community leadership and work with addiction, in 2004, Margaret was invited to join the International Council of the 13 Indigenous Grandmothers. In 2012, she hosted the 11th gathering of the International Council of the 13 Indigenous Grandmothers on the Northern Cheyenne Reservation. During this time, Margaret and 18 people rode horses from Oklahoma to Montana, commemorating the Northern Cheyenne Exodus of 1878. This journey was documented and is the focus of the film, The Ride Home. Margaret is the founder of the Cheyenne Elders Council, formed in 2007, with the mission to heal the oppression of First Nations people from within the community. She seeks to make peace with her Cheyenne community, focusing on her own generation. In addition, Margaret founded the Tsisistas Sacred School, I'm sure I didn't do justice to that word, near her home in Calumet, Oklahoma, to teach youth about Cheyenne identity, ceremony, and way of life. Margaret has an associate degree in creative writing from the Institute of American Indian Arts in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And with that, thank you very much for being with us here today. We are so happy that you're here. And we're so happy to talk to you about water.
Yes.
You mentioned to me in past conversations that water is an important part of the Cheyenne creation story. And I wondered if you could start out by describing this and how it has shaped your relationship to water.
Okay. Water was everywhere. And the process was, the water was everywhere, but there was birds. So this mud hen with red eyes was watching all the rest of the birds, and they kept saying they wanted to go underneath the water. They had to dive in the water to get the clay at the bottom of the water. So this mud hen with red eyes was the last one to make attempt to go in this water. Went in, was gone for a while, almost forgotten about, and then he came up. It came up, and then it had clay on its bill. Then he shook the clay, or he shook, and then the clay came off, and it hit the water, and there was land. And he shook again, and there were the Cheyennes that came off of his bill. So that's how I can translate the story. So we all have this story about the water, coming from the water, the creation stories. So the Arapahoe creation, that was the Cheyenne, this is the Arapahoe creation story, is that there was water all around, and this turtle came up to the surface, and on its back, it had the Arapahoe people. So we were told that water was the #1 element that we would always use for doctrine, for living through hard times. It was like looked at like essential being, and used it as a mystical, I say, person, element. And so it was very mystical. It showed a lot of us, how the water could heal us if we were sick, if something was wrong with us. And I remember grandmother would always get a willow's branch, dip it in the water, and she would put it on our faces to wake up in the morning. And we were just waiting for that, like it was a blessing for the day. So water was treated like a person.
So it sounds like water is important in understanding how the earth came to be, and that it was out of the water that land and people came.
Yes.
Am I understanding that correctly?
Yes.
So the importance of water is very high in the understanding of the Cheyenne and Arapahoe people.
Yes.
And it's almost, sorry, go ahead.
So there's a ceremony that we have that we go without water. And so this is a teaching, that water was prevalent, was everywhere. But the water was also used to go without the water, and what would come, dreams or thoughts of the water. And I remember once when I was fasting, I smelled the water, and I could feel the essence of the water, even though I had gone with 2 days without water. So there's the opposite too, that we have found these ceremonies with the water.
So water is really important for ceremonies, both in honoring and use of water in the ceremony, and then the absence of water from the ceremony. And that's a sort of powerful transition into, can you talk a little bit about how you understand the element of water and how your ancestors talked about the different forms of water, like snow, rain, rivers, or storms?
I'm getting this message about turning on the screen to share.
Oh, Maribeth, I ended your screen share so people could get a better view. If you have more slides later, you can start it up again. I wasn't sure. So I just turned that off so people get a better view of the two of you, and I think we're good to go now. Thanks.
Sorry, I can't find you again. Open. Oh gosh.
This webinar requires a certain amount of humor to.
I hope you're laughing. I don't know.
We can see you, so we can keep talking. We can see you. Okay, maybe you can't see us, but we can see you.
You can?
Yes.
It says try to answer.
I would suggest just pretending like you can see us and continuing the conversation.
my. What the heck? Okay, can you see me?
Yep, we can see you.
Well, water is really important to us today. Modern day Native American, Cheyenne, Arapahoe, we are becoming more aware of it. I think the part that really is kind of hurts our feelings is that we have to buy water when we used to could find the springs and drink from the springs, the natural springs. So there's a lot of oh, there you are. So there's I remember one time the horses needed water. There was no water. Their watering hole had disappeared, and we were talking about water, and one of my cousins said, let's just go and pray outside where the water had disappeared. So we went there, and we were there praying, meditating, and talking to the water, to come back and to give us a sign, because people would, the medicine people would have a bowl of water, and they could see things in the water about future or healing. It was like a crystal ball. And so we did that. We went to the watering hole that was empty, and we talked to it. And then we had walked a little ways from it, and we heard something trickling, and here there was a spring beside it, and it started running water into that water hole. That was really amazing how that happened. And then the horses came and they drank water, and we were so happy. But when we told our neighbors that, they couldn't believe it, as we couldn't believe it either, But this is what happens around water. Water is mystical. Water is a gift. Water is life, and it tells us many things about who we are on earth, is what my grandmother would say. Water was the first thing that they used in the mandala in the Sundance to paint themselves with really hail drops, round dots on the body to make a mandala for the rain. It was always around the rain, the water, and the ponds, and the watering holes, the springs. And the Cheyenne and Arapahoe migrated from the north. They followed the river, the Milk River, the Missouri, the Mississippi. And to look at it today, I think it's really huge. It's a vast land where they have walked or to find the water. And it is amazing to imagine that they were migrating, they were walking to, and the water was the one that guided them south. So here we are in the southern part of the Mississippi, near the Mississippi. And then there was the aquifer they talked about, that was a healing part. If there was the water came from the aquifer, was medicine that they put on their heads, on the top of their heads, and it was a special blessing. So water is really, I am starting to talk about water stories that I know with my elders, and it is amazing what water has become, and one of my cousins says, water is still the same. Water will always be the same. And I say, water is electricity. You know, they make electricity from it. And they also dam the water up to use it for cities, towns, to pipe the water in. So we talk about this with the elders today, and the younger people are really wanting to hear these stories that we know about the water. My generation now is we're the last ones to know this water, and that we didn't have running water in our homes. When we were growing up, we had to haul the water from the spring. And
so you're talking about your relationship to water and articulating a deep respect and reverence for water and the role that it plays in your life. And so a lot of the stories that you know, they've been passed down from generations.
Yes. Yes.
So can you talk about how you learned these stories and how they impacted how you understand the element of water?
Okay, the water is, like I said, essential being, and they used it in all of our ceremonies. And until water was being bought, that my people started really waking up to finding these stories of what they remember, you know, from the beginning. Stories that were told about the water. The water could be like a crystal ball to tell us about the future. I was really interested in that, and that every healer has to have water. And when they're making medicine or going to doctor someone, they would have to have a cup of water in the room. Not necessarily using it, but it was like a guard, or like it was presence. It just had to be there, was with a cup of water, a bowl of water. And I asked about that. I said, why do you have to have that water in here? And they said it's to neutralize the energy that we're tapping into.
So when we've talked in the past, I've shared a little bit about my previous work and looking at groundwater and surface water interactions and being in part of this, you know, the science community and studying water and the importance of water. And from your perspective on the periphery of academia, what are ways that we can expand as a hydrologic sciences community to be inclusive of broader worldviews with respect to water?
Well, the water is really being tested all the time. It's been high value now. And so I'm really, really interested in what scientists are doing with the water, and what I guess they're testing the water. They're wanting to clean the water from the pollution, and how we use the water. And like from my point of view, it's holy, it's sacred, you know, to use it in an honorable way, as if it's part of my my family, like it's a family member. But again, it's interesting how the scientists have come to thinking about the Native Americans, what we had beliefs before. Teaching.
Can you say more about that? What do you mean by that?
Beliefs and teaching of the water, the belief system, you know, of spiritual, like I said, essential being, and then again, it has the body. It has a body of scarcity, you know, and then there's the other part of the when there's a flood in the east. About a month ago, there was flood in Arkansas, the state over from Oklahoma, and watching the people there, you know, being flooded out. So water is really has its own power and being, is the way that I look at it. And I'm so interested in you scientists that study this water. And the water is one of the 4 sacred elements. The water first, the earth, the fire, and the air. And so I think that's scientific, you know, part for the Native people, that we believe in these 4 elements as the 4 cardinal directions, and that we use in our ceremonies. So the water is always seems to be the powerful one, because it's in our bodies, and we can't live without the water. And so when I'm talking to my elders, like last week, I told them I was going to be on this program, and they said, my cousin said, "Aren't you scared to talk about the water?" Because they would always tell us, treat it with respect and be careful with the water. And I said, yes. I said, I am. I'm being cautious, you know, with the water, talking about it, and wanting to also acknowledge the scientists for what you're doing to learn about this water and the land. Water has to be on the land for these rivers and the lakes. So it's very interesting what you're doing.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of you know, potential for scientists to really get involved in science and all parts of the United States, including a lot of you know, sovereign nations, and the issues that are going on the land in these sovereign nations. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about what, you know, in Oklahoma, what are the main water issues that you're facing as a community?
Well, there's a drought. I live in a drought area, and so water is really we're asking almost all the time in my prayers, affirmations for water. And everywhere I go with meeting my people, I ask them if they could pray for the water. Because here in Oklahoma, as a child, used to be very humid and green, lush. And I never heard of being in a drought. But now, as a great grandmother, here I am. I'm asking my relatives to pray for water. So the land is also telling us about ourselves every one of these elements are telling about human beings, our reflection, and it's not good. You know, it's very it makes suffering. You know, there's suffering going on because even now there's people, their water's contaminated. They cannot drink the water, and they cannot move because they do not have a place to go. And we live on a reservation. We're restricted on this reservation land. So it's not easy just to pick up and move to California or to where there's water that's valuable. So it has a great effect on us now. But attention, totally, you know, for me to be able to talk about water with them, and some of the younger kids are really interested because they have science classes, and they said, we want to know about this water. How else is it used, or what did we use? We used it mostly for spiritual connection. We used it for our ceremonies. So that's what I'm telling you now, you know, about it, sharing with you.
Mm-hmm.
And I shouldn't be sharing, you know, some of the mystical parts because, you know, the belief system that
Mm-hmm.
the natives were pagans, you know, that we worship the water, we worship the land, you know. It was the four elements, very important to us. So now it's exciting. It's really making me happy that the scientists, you know, are really another part of this population or educated people wanting to learn and study this water. I'm happy about it, you know. I want to see what comes of it because I met Dr. Emoto in Olympia, Washington. He was talking at the spring there in Olympia, and they asked me to bless the water there. But his study, you know, about the water was similar almost, I guess, to the way we Native Americans look at the water as a person. And I was excited when he said his wife found the drop of water and looked at it under the microscope and saw an image of herself. So I really am interested in that part, and even telling my people not to waste the water. Even my granddaughter was 4 years old, and she must have been listening. And when they brushed their teeth, you know, she would say, "Don't leave the water on. Shut the water off. Here's a cup," and she would give them a cup, put water in there. So I really like that, you know, the little things that I had talked about. She listened. And so she started her own movement with the water. So
that's great.
I am pleased too with the water here because I get the water piped in through the rural area, and I have to pay for the water. My bills are like $33 a month. So I take care of it, you know, and I would like to harvest water from my garden.
So we have a few questions that have come in, and I wanted to make sure that we had enough time for people to ask questions if they have them. So from all the participants, there's about 70 of us on the call.
Oh,
and if you have a question, please put it in the question and answer section, and we're going to try to get it to as many as we can. So this is a question from Kevin Murphy. He says, were there particular practices or traditions that you remember doing to show respect or care for local water?
For local water, yes, they would bring waters together, like from the prairie to the desert. People that would come to the doctrines would bring their cups of water, and they would put it all together, and have that. They couldn't see, how it all mixed together, but just knowing that they had brought water from their homes, and the feeling of that, bringing it together felt like it was a chemistry, of elements being brought together that unknowingly, we were doing in our ceremony. Is that enough to explain about that?
Yeah, I think it's a question that you can answer shortly, or you could spend several hours on it. So I think that's a great answer. And we have another question is, thank you for sharing. This is from Laura Saito. Thank you for sharing how water shapes your culture. It is very inspiring. Can you share more about how you treat water with respect when talking about it?
Well, the water is, when we say water in our language, it's like a holy mother or being, that cares and that loves us. We get that feeling from the water, and I look at it as either one, it could be a he or a she, but it is protecting us also. It feels like it's protecting us. It feels like when we are talking about the water, to be careful, what we say about the water, as if it's listening. Emoto did say, water can hear us. So I was surprised with that. And I tell my relatives, yeah, the water listens. They said, we knew that already. Who told you this? I said, I heard it from Emoto. And so miscommunication, like about the water, but there are people here that remember that the water is, it hears us, and it really heals us. Those are the two main understandings that I have.
It hears us and it heals us.
Yes.
That is something that we don't often talk about as hydrologic scientists.
Yeah.
It's something to reflect on, though.
Yeah.
Definitely. I have another question that came in. So it's from James Caligari, and I apologize if I'm butchering people's names. But he says, thank you, grandmother, for being willing to teach us today. It seems that we scientists do not have the ability to understand what Native people know about the earth. This includes understanding what they know about water. The land is telling us about ourselves, and it's not good. That is, he quoted you, the land is not telling us about ourselves, and it's not good. I felt it so deeply when you said water is part of our family. It is a person. There is so much that our language cannot express. How can we help scientists and others to open their mind to this type of knowledge?
Well, just keep talking about it, and I met you and at the Water and Women symposium. I just keep talking about water, and it seems to guide me to people, I believe that with you, scientists. And so my grandchildren going to school, and I tell them about this, and they get excited, and I'm glad they get excited, because of scientists studying the water And I tell them the other part, it's like our brother or it's like our sister. It's part of our family. We cannot go without water. And some of the, my other grandson, he said, well, water could be our mother and father too. I said, yeah, that's probably the other part of it that we feel in the time that we're at what ceremony we're in, because we can't do without water. We cannot do without water to do a ceremony. We cannot do a ceremony without a mother and father, a female and male. So that is really important to us.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. So there's another person that wrote in the chat and said, thank you for speaking. She said she's had amazing conversations with her grandmother over the years, and she has shared with me her wisdom. It reminds me of that. Good. And I wanted to just kind of follow up with what you were saying with a question that someone had asked about how, like how we talk about water. And I know that Grandmother Margaret, you've talked about the use of language and the power of language, and how English is in many ways a great language. It's sort of a universal connector, but it's also limited in its capacity for communicating certain types of concepts because of the very structure. And I know that English is not your first language. There's another language which I actually don't know the name of, but I would love if you would share a little bit about how language plays a role in talking about water.
Yeah, Tsitstas, my Cheyenne language. It's a living language, they say. And it's most of the words are in now time, now. The pivot is just the docomost, we talk about water like the person is in the room, and that it is its presence is really important to us, because I put a cup of water, when we are gathering, and to make sure that the water is there guarding, sort of like, in my sense, guarding. So in our language, it's first language is Cheyenne and the English language. So it's difficult to translate into English, as you've heard me, when I first started talking about the water. It's taught about water is everywhere. It's like air is everywhere, and water is everywhere. It's just the words translation. The water is everywhere, and water is has its own way, its own life, its own energy, its way of living. So we talk like that about the water, honoring the water all the time, every time. But here is this, we're living in this modern time, from that language, and it's still the same. The language is still the same about the water. But like I said, to buy water, like I'm buying the water that comes here to the house, and to go to buy water. And now people are also saying there are different chemicals in water, and test that we could test our own water. So it's interesting to know that water is filtered through the springs, from the aquifer up, And to explain that to my grandson, you know, he was asking, well, what is the aquifer? And I said, it is deep down in the ground above the earth, in between the earth and the water. And that is the filter, seems to me, the filter of water. So is that right or wrong, filtering the water, the aquifer? I'm asking you the question.
Yeah, well, water definitely, you know, lands on the land surface and infiltrates, and if it keeps going, it recharges the aquifers below, and through that process, it, you know, it travels through different types of sediments or consolidated rock, and through the different fractures, and so it does get filtered. It interacts with all of the different, you know, sediments and rocks that it travels through. And so sometimes it's filtered, you know, sometimes things are taken out and sometimes things are added, depending on what those chemical reactions are with what it interacts with. So so it's 12:01 or my time. So I want to just give time for one more question, maybe like a short answer to this last question before we sign off.
Okay.
This is from Gayatri Gopala Krishnan. And this person asked, thank you, Grandmother Bahan, for your stories and explanations today. Can you tell us how you think we can bridge the differences between the worldviews held by First Nation and traditional cultures and the current economic and cultural frameworks?
Say that again.
So I'm very sorry, or they are asking, how can we bridge the differences in worldviews between First Nations people and dominant sort of economic cultural frameworks that exist in media today?
Well, exactly what we're doing here, what you have set up, this gathering, and to talk about the water and all the pictures or images you have in your mind about water. And that's another thing that my grandfather would say, you are equipped with everything. You came to this earth, and so I'm going to watch you and see what you came with, what you are born with. And so that connection there was, he was referring to the water, you know, coming through the birth canal of my mother. And then also that the water is, it's already has its way. But when you're aware of it, then you notice an opportunity come to you. Like for me, 13th grandmother, our first issue in our council was water. The water was being polluted. And so we blessed the water filters in Omega in Rhinebeck, New York. So there is so much knowledge and sharing back and forth that must happen right now, you know, and that's what we're doing. I'm telling you about the spiritual Native American, Indigenous spiritual connection with the water. And you're here with the study of water. So it's all connected, and it all will connect in its way, like with us here. And we can even emphasize, you know, and more gatherings to talk about this water.
Well, I just want to thank you so much for taking the time today to talk with this community of people. There's been great interest, and we're just grateful for the stories that you shared and your knowledge that you shared, and your presence. So thanks for sticking with the technological challenges And thanks to everyone who attended today. We really appreciate your interest. If you want to know more about follow-up to this event, please either subscribe or send an email to Riverbytes. And we're going to put some resources together. And I also just wanted to clarify, there was one person that mentioned that in the introduction, I used past tense instead of present about people, Indigenous people. And I want to clarify, there are many Indigenous tribes today that are sovereign nations, many that are not recognized nations, and they're living today. And they're very present and important for us to talk about and consider in the science that we do in collaboration. So thank you all for joining. Our next speaker will be in 1 week. Kenny Swiftbird. He is Ogallala Lakota tribe, and he will be sharing with us about water histories. He's done a lot of studies on water quality, and we look forward to hearing from him. So thank you all, and have a great week.
Thank you.